John Kessel, welcome to the Drexel Sport Coaching Leadership webinar. I'm thrilled that you could join us. I know when we caught up last in when was that? Florida for the U.S. Sailing Convention, and you were the world was a different place back in December of 2019. So we've learned a lot so far, and love to hear your thoughts on where we're at and where are we going. Because yeah, you've got a lot of experience, and I'm thrilled. I've heard you speak many times, and I know there's stacks to sort of catch everybody up on, but there's a lot we can talk about where we're heading. So over to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for your patience, everybody. Yeah, that US sailing one was a pretty pivotal one. So there's going to be a lot of similarity because that was where I was getting ready to kind of leave USA Volleyball after Tokyo, not knowing that Tokyo would be postponed. And so I was starting to pour everything out. And so that said, we've also learned a little bit about the pandemic, obviously. So uh, I'm going to just start. This is kind of like, it's Cam knows, this is going to be really the things I've learned the hard way. I wish I could talk to young John Kessel and say these things. Maybe not all would register, but I really want young John Kessel to hear this. And to a degree, that means that my son Cody and my daughter Mackenzie and my stepdaughter Elise, that are all coaches, benefit from some of the stuff I've learned the hard way. Kesselville is a banner that a lot of coaches talk about when I come into the volleyball world, because in my sport, they ignore the regulatory stimuli of the net at their peril. They practice in front of the net all the time, and it makes practice look good, but it doesn't transfer to performance. And that's a classic Richard Schmidt, Dr. Richard Schmidt, motor learning expert, that passed away. You're practicing for practice and not for performance. And I'd say that was one of the top 10 things in the last decade I learned, how too many sports practice. So practice looks organized and good and pretty, even though their sport might be pretty chaotic and that's the way it's played. And that's a mistake I don't want others to make. So, okay, because most people listening here teach others, I'm also sharing a bunch of secrets about things that I find make learning more fun. So, Andrew, watch me, and Cam knows this one, but Andrew, make a circle like this if you would. Okay, now up by your face is where I want you to put it. Now put it on your chin. Okay. Okay. So you went, and then you put it to your chin, and that's 90% of the people will actually put it on their cheek because they immediately see me do it. Light travels faster than sound, which is another thing I learned the hard way. And they put it on their cheek, even though I say chin. So that's one of the sort of icebreakers that I do. Another one for all of you listening, Rachel included, I want you to reach as high as you can. So Andrew, reach as high as you can. Rachel, reach as high as you can. Okay, and now reach higher. And so when I say reach higher, what happens? Everybody in the audience ends up reaching higher. And that's something to contemplate, because even though my words say as high as you can, when you say reach higher, you'll see the whole crowd all of a sudden go a little higher. And you can say, well, what's that about? I was very specific, reach as high as you can. And yet, as soon as I said higher, you all reached higher. Maybe that's my role as a coach, is that little bit of a higher that you just did after I said as high as you can. The last one that I love to do sometimes with drama on a stage is to ask how many great teachers you've had from kindergarten through college. And I'll do it something like this. So let's all do this, make a fist. And then for every great teacher you had from kindergarten through college, you put up a finger. And you kind of rush through your mind's eye of scholastic stuff and you put up the fingers. And then from the distance, you can look out as a speaker and you'll see on average what you see with Rachel. 3 great teachers. There'll be 5 and there'll be 1, but the average universally, and not in just in my country, you know, is 3. Okay, so you probably had 30 teachers. Then the second part of this little exercise as an icebreaker, as a learning moment as well, is to then say, okay, I'm up here at the whiteboard. Would you please start saying the words that come to mind when you think of those great teachers? What words come to mind? And this little flood from a crowd will come up of fun and cared about me and, you know, or caring and disciplined or whatever. It's just a great list. And after about 10 or 15 of those words that pop out, you step back and say, you know what? This clinic is over. Go do those 10 things. Go do those 12 things. And then you dramatically walk off the stage to laughter, and then you come back and you start your clinic. So those are the 3 kind of fun things that I love to do. The final one I carry as a prop, and that's this, what is this? What the hell is this thing you're seeing on the screen? Somewhere in my youth, somebody gave me a metal Harman Kardon nose flute. And this is a plastic version of a nose flute. And you put it up to your nose and you blow down through the opening, and you can play the Star Spangled Banner and, you know, any song you want. But what's remarkable is you can now buy these in plastic for about $1 each. So if you're able to spend about 12 bucks for a small team or a class, you hand them out and you watch people problem solve, making this thing make a noise. It's hysterical to watch them blowing the wrong way and stuff. And of course, you need to know how to play it before you dramatically use this tool. But I find this nose flute thing to be so off the wall unique. Nobody's ever seen it, used it. And then when you start to play the Star Spangled Banner, people just kind of go, what? How are you doing that? And then they start to figure it out. And then one kid in the group will go, hurt, and make a noise. And everybody goes, how'd you do that? You know, and that's just fun group discussion and motor learning, you know, because I can demonstrate by playing a song, but they don't see the whole of it. And so it's fun to see them figure it out. If you email me, I'm happy to send you this. This is pretty much my entire things I learned the hard way. I've been collecting these sentences that make me go, aha, yes, I'm going to use that. And this are the first 2 pages of 16 pages of this dense of a stream of consciousness is, I guess, all I can call it. And, you know, so it's just, as I go away and more people take over, I want to make sure that they can see some of these neat ideas beyond what we're going to have time to cover here for sure. So, who taught me the phrase ancora imparo? And it's, any idea from the crowd here? Do you have any idea who said ancora imparo? That's a pretty good, talented human. And the answer is Michelangelo. And he said it at the age of 87 when he was laying on his back in the Sistine Chapel or whatever, painting away, and he leaned down to his assistants and said, ancora imparo. And ancora imparo means, and translates directly in Italian to still learning. And so that's always been sort of my catchphrase. I have a friendship group that we call Ancora Imparo, and we're just constantly sharing new ideas with us with no fear of retribution or, you know, hacking at us. And you know, if Michelangelo, who is a hell of a painter, can still be learning at 87, I'd like to think that all of us can. At the same time, I want people to know what these three words, Citius, Altius, Fortius, mean. And a lot of people don't know the actual three Latin words that mean swifter, higher, stronger. And the other words that I think have always been impactful and unique when you go out and attempt to get a crowd. In my sport, for sure, the words are drills and the words are secrets. If you say, I'm going to share some secrets with you, the group that comes kind of comes more open-minded in my experience. They want to listen to your secrets. And in my sport, drills are the drugs of coaches. God, it's just, they all want to do drills. They want, I used to, as a young coach, I would wait to buy Bob Bratton's 300 plus volleyball drill book and think I'd gone to heaven. And then when he came out with 400 plus more volleyball drills, I couldn't wait until that hit my shelves. And I've learned the hard way that, it's not about the drills. In fact, the vast majority of drills get in the way of learning and performance. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. So to the word Citius, Altius, Fortius, it's all about the The translation, you see, most of your listeners that you will coach and teach with, they'll never be the gold medalist. So even the silver medalist isn't the fastest, but he or she is faster and stronger and higher enough to win a silver medal. And everybody in Olympism, which is a thing I teach my kids, it's about this that personally I want to work on being swifter and higher and stronger. And it may medal and it may not, but if I'm continually working on my own that's really what sports often in life is all about. Another Latin phrase that I think is pretty important is seen here in Greek also in the slide, and that is primum non cocere. And to those that don't know what that is seen, you can kind of see it in here. That's the Hippocratic Oath. So you see Hippocrates in there as a sort of a secret. The Hippocratic Oath is what I think a lot of coaches should take as their coaching oath. First, do no harm. We see too many coaches harming kids and athletes mentally and physically and spiritually and things, and that's not what sports is about, in my humble opinion. An engineering place in Scotland has, in the entrance to their engineering place in the 1870s, there's facts and not opinions. I love it because when you build the Eiffel Tower, or when you build cabins here in the woods like where I am, you're not building them on opinions, you're building them on facts and science. And yet so many things in the motor learning science, people just shrug off as, well, this is my opinion, as if your opinion is going to keep the building from falling down. So we spend an incredible amount of time sharing facts of science in our sport. And I think all coaches would be doing better if they can continue to focus on facts as they present their information. So I throw this out as well in my volleyball version. If I went to the Ultimate Frisbee Clinic, which I thought is kind of a cool sport, I threw that in for this group. Who here coaches sailing? And the whole point of a topic is if you're taught. So let's say, Rachel, do you have a sport that you teach, or more broadly? What's your sport?
It's rowing.
Okay. So in a rowing group, and I've loved working with them, who here coaches rowing? And they all raise their hand. And then you say, oh, and then you give them an or. And you say, coach it. You know, in volleyball, I give them a volleyball because they all say, I coach volleyball. And you go, really? And I hand them a volleyball. And then you sit back and say, show me how good you are. There's a volleyball. You said you coach volleyball. You know? And it's fun to see that, again, that shift where they finally go, you go, you know, you see, you don't coach volleyball. You coach amazing humans. You coach young athletes. You coach people. You don't coach volleyball. And for me, that's meant that, as Cam knows, I kind of shoot off to all these other sports that I don't even have sailing down here, of course, because I've probably done 30 different sports. But I've been doing this since 1972. And I've learned a lot of things the hard way, of course, as we all do. But in the process, I find that the principles are so important because they span all learning. So as we work on the facts of learning and how do we win the learning battle, not necessarily the athletic competition, how do I learn faster? How do I learn more effectively? Then I go into my sport and I become a better teacher of this motor skill that I call volleyball in my case. And I'll give you an example. I was working with Cleveland Indians, thanks to Dan Coyle. He brought me down. You know, he's got his great books, The Culture Code and The Talent Code and The Little Book of Talent. And Dan's really been a wonderful mentor and colleague. And so he said, I need you to come work with the Cleveland Indians and just come in and watch. And so the short of this story about learning more effectively and learning more efficiently, Major League Baseball's been doing shit for hundreds of years. But I walked in and I started asking some questions. And so I came to the catchers group. And there were 3 catchers catching and 15 other catchers. This is at spring training. So they had the single A all the way to the Major League Baseball biggies there. And in the process, you know, I watched and then I said, okay, so who is that that's dropping the ball into the jug machine or into that pitching machine? Who's doing that? And then the coach bristled and he goes, well, that's gold medal or golden glove this and Major League All-Star 10 times this guy. And I go, okay, well, so my question is, are they going to teach these catchers they're working with better or from behind this jug machine, or could they let one of the 3 catchers that are standing there in their catcher gear, standing around board, drop the ball in the jug machine and stand behind the catcher like an umpire and see what's going on? Well, he said, well, they'd be much better if they were right behind him. I said, well, can you make that happen? And he goes, and he brings over this group and 3 guys start dropping the balls. And the one guy that came down the left side of the group, before he could even get to the catcher that he was going to work with, another catcher, because he wasn't behind the machine anymore, started asking him questions. And I pointed that out and said, see, this is what happens when you stop being a machine and start being a coach. So that was the first thing. Then I kept watching and then I said, how many times, because they were practicing sort of a quick move from this glove to throw it to first or something. I said, how many times do they do this in a game without a batter? And the guy starting to get on to me, he goes, well, never in the history of baseball. I said, okay, so can you get 3, they don't have to take off their gear because they're going to be going through the station, but can they grab like a bat and do what batters do to catchers when they're practicing this move to first? And he goes, of course. And so he yelled and 3 more grabbed bats and they never swung, but they did batter things to make the move much more reality based. And it's training in reality is sometimes what we don't do enough. And then I said, how come they're just transferring their hands? Don't you want them to throw it as fast as possible, the whole move? And well, yeah. And I said, Well, then put another catcher over there and have them pretend that's first, and that guy's at second, and this one over here, it's safe to throw it to third, right? And have the catchers rotate. So they're going through and throwing it to first, and then they get back and they throw it to third. And so after that was over, the catcher coach and the catchers came up and said, that was fantastic. Was so much better. And again, it's not that what Major League Baseball's been doing with jug machines. Oh, I added one more question. I said, I'm looking at these jug machines, and these catchers are tracking a ball that's coming in from here. I don't know baseball too well, but I know a guy named Randy the Unit Johnson or something. And my recollection is he's like 6'9", and he was an incredible pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And he must release the ball 3 times higher than this jug machine. Isn't there an average release point that your catchers are going to see, maybe higher and lower? But who releases the ball at the height of this jug machine? And they said, nobody. I said, well, that should be thrown at the jug, at the release point of a pitcher. It shouldn't be down here. That tracking that is not going to mean that your move is going to be as effective and as so the next day, they'd already added extenders to the jug machine, and they dropped the ball in from kind of a pitcher height, where the pitcher releases it on average. So those are principles in my mind based on training in reality. And we know that transfer is more effective if it's reality based. And so a lot of these things mean that I go work with pole vaulting and synchronized swimming. Synchronized swimming was my favorite. 200 or 300 people at the OTC, 299 women, and a guy from Venezuela. That was so cool. Just cracked me up. The guy from Venezuela. So, all right. I think our famous Navy Admiral Gal said it best. The most dangerous phrase in the language is we've always done it this way. So for me, my motto is to develop amazing leaders. That's why I teach. Now, part of it's because whether I'm talking to Olympians or 10-year-olds, I'm developing the person to be a leader. Oh, and I'm using volleyball as my tool, but I'm focused on the leadership development of this athlete, not their per se volleyball skills. That comes as woven into it. And as I continue to develop leadership, the 3% that go on to college, great. But the 97% that I'm working with that don't go to college, I'm hoping that I've developed some more leaders. And that's my dream, is to make them better leaders. I've learned the hard way, even now more in the COVID era, because of the friendships that come out of the blue and everything, that winning and losing matches are very temporary things and friendships last forever. That's a Chinese proverb about friendships lasting forever. What this little slideshow shows is the gal in skiing, Long Ping, in 1984, kicked our ass for the gold medal in volleyball in Los Angeles. 4 months after she won and was a superstar, and they did stamps of her and stadiums of her and coins of her in China. Just 4 months after she kicked our ass, she was living with me in Albuquerque, New Mexico, partly to escape the fame and kind of chill, but also to start learning volleyball in a different way and to start to learn English. She spoke no English when she came off the plane. So in 95, I was lucky to be at the centennial of my sport and spend time in Beijing working with her. And in 2008, she's wearing the USA and she coached us to a silver medal. And then in 2016, she won the gold medal. We won the bronze. It was pretty cool to see this first woman ever in our sport win a gold medal. But it started with making friends. So the thing I've learned the hard way here, especially in this COVID era, is that if they beat you, the one that was the best over there, reach out to them and strike up a friendship, because that gal or guy is passionate about the sport as much as you are. Get to know them, get to know her, because they're cool people. And this is one of the best examples. Empathy. I work for the FIVB since 1988 as an international instructor, level 5 or whatever, but in the requirement, this picture just always blows me away, that the volleyball courts are being turned into laundry things most of the time because they want to dry their clothes. And, you know, when I remember I went to El Salvador, and long story short, one indoor gym in the nation. So, you know, here I am with every elementary school in my city having an indoor gym, and they have one indoor gym in the country. You know, you've got to relate to where you are and be empathetic to what's actually happening to the people you're working with. This is kind of a fun one for several reasons. One, number 23 on the lower right is my son. He's with the U.S. national team and plays over in Berlin for the recycling team, the #1 team in the Bundesliga over there. Fact is, for all listening, he played 10 sports growing up. Yes, he played volleyball, but he didn't play much 6-on-6. He played doubles with me a lot, but he played football and he played basketball and he played lacrosse. He was captain of his lacrosse team in high school. He's captain of his tennis team. He just loved volleyball the most. So yeah, he's playing volleyball, but that's his choice. It wasn't mine. I gave him a choice. Why is my record so good? 35 losses. This is, again, a concept to wrap around your group, rowing included, to never be a child's last coach. To all listening, those 35 are the ones I lost. The next year they quit my sport. That's my loss. I don't know what my record is other than that. I have no idea how many, I've won gold medals and blah, blah, but the whole point is that everyone I keeps playing the sport the year after. That's how I judge you, if I've done my good job of helping you to be a better coach so that everybody loves whatever you're teaching. Now, because Rachel, you're in rowing, I'm going to throw another story and a sidebar that's not in the slides here. I think it behooves us at the highest level and even at the younger level that if they are going to get cut for whatever reason from your sport, that we have the duty to also give that athlete suggestions to keep playing your sport or to choose a different sport. In my sport, it just so happens when kids quit after making their high school, or not making their high school team, we want them to know very clearly that there's an 80 and over national championships in USA Volleyball. You've got 60 years more to get better. Don't just quit because you're being cut from this team. But as you go up the ranks, I'm now going to tell you about a gal named Joanna. I think her last name was Woodward, but we had to cut her. I was coaching in Australia in 1989 or so, 1990. And the national team, she was 6'1", strong, tall for an Aussie, and tall in the Asian zone that Australia competed in. And long story short, we had to cut her because her jump was only about 14 inches and she couldn't compete at that next level. But I took her and her dad aside and said, so I'm looking at you, Joanne, and I'm thinking you could be pretty good at water polo. And I'm thinking you could probably be pretty good at rowing and possibly even pretty good at team handball. So I suggest this is how you get in touch with Australian rowing, da, da, da. Well, rowing happened to be in Canberra where we were training. And so she went to rowing. She got on the machine, the erg machine or some sort of machine, and she broke the record. And she'd never pulled on an erg machine. They threw in her boat in the boat, and within 4 months, she won a world championship gold medal in the 4-person rowing or the 8-person rowing. I can't remember which now, but it's been about 30 years. But that's, again, part of our duty that, when we cut kids from volleyball in the US, we show them team handball, which is an Olympic sport and a great sport. And the team handball team is going, you're cutting people that we would die for. So let's do more of that when we say you're no longer in our sport. So never be a child's last coach is the line we spoke of earlier. This guy is my hero. ESPN, named him the best coach in the first 100 years or 50 years of sport. John Wooden. And anything a new listener to this broadcast can read about or by John Wooden is highest recommendation. All of it's great stuff to become a better teacher of any sport. It just so happens that Marv Dunphy, our Olympic gold medal coach in '88, before he went to Seoul, he took a sabbatical and he got his thesis, PhD thesis, and he studied John Wooden in sport leadership. He had 100 hours of interviewing him. And I was writing a new book for coaches, for our basic level coaches, that's called Impact, which stands for Increased Mastery and Professional Application of Coaching Theory. And that took us about 2 days to figure out that word. But the book, is mandated for every brand new volleyball coach in USA Volleyball. And I said, Marv, we won the gold medal. We're flying back and on the plane, and you could stand up and talk back then more in the galley and stuff. So I said, hey, Marv, I'm writing this impact manual. You did your PhD thesis on John Wooden in 25 words or less. What should a brand new coach know? What did you learn doing your PhD thesis on John Wooden? And he said, John, I don't even need 25 words. I just need 2. Tell them to be consistent. And that's always been an anchor part of our coaching. And, that stops the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde coaching. But he told story after story about watching how John Wooden worked with everybody and how incredibly, he just was blown away at how consistent he was as a teacher. Now, some of you are going to hit the brick wall and they're not going to want to change. So out of all the things I've done in a more intimate clinics or working with specific teams, but even in larger groups, this line is what came from an orthopedic surgeon, a cardiac surgeon, and a brain surgeon, a neurosurgeon friend of mine, who were watching their daughters do volleyball and said, they're doing the same thing her older daughter did 10 years ago. What the hell's going on? And then they said, if we practice medicine now like we did 5 years ago, and the neurosurgeon said probably 2 years for me, I would be sued for malpractice. But those of us listening today know that there's a ton of coaches that say, it worked for me, I got good that way. And we have this huge teaching the way we were taught machine that just keeps churning out old shit instead of moving forward into things that are done better. It's not about right or wrong. It's about more effective and more efficient. And we'll see that slide too. So, who is this? I draw this usually up on my whiteboard, and I draw it similar to what this is. I drew this one even, but I go, who is this? And people will say names, and then the whole point of this is the ideal coach who talks very little, listens and watches a lot more than I was as a young coach. As a young coach, I could talk. We clock some younger coaches, they get their kids out of a drill and they talk to them for 5 minutes, you know. And this image has helped some people make the shift to talking less and listening and looking more. Sometimes I put this at the very beginning. Probably I should have for this group. So let's pretend we're just starting talking. I'm about ready to give you some information, and it in no way is it intended to be criticism. If I'm going to criticize anybody in my talks and in my sessions, I criticize young John Kessel. I pick on me. I never pick on them. And I want them to know that I'm giving you, and you can choose to use the information or not, but I'm not meaning it to be in criticism. And as I said earlier, it's not about wrong or black and white. It's about being more effective and efficient. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but there's only probably a couple, 2 or 3 ways to skin it really effectively and efficiently. And it's learned over time how to skin it the fastest. And that's what we're looking for at the highest and at the 10-year-old level, because yeah, Karch and John Sprar, Olympic coaches, they get 6 days a week with these athletes, maybe 7. I get 4 hours a week. I have to probably be more effective and efficient than the Olympic coaches. Yet I'm only coaching 10-year-olds. So these ideas hopefully will make you more effective and efficient. I was with Jackie Joyner Kersey at the OTC for lunch one day, and we were talking about teaching. And she happened to have played volleyball before she became a track star and chose track and field. And she loved volleyball. And we were talking about good coaching, and she said, you know, I realized that in track and field that the athlete that knows why beats the athlete that knows how. And that's something I cling to. And I just couldn't, I just like, well, that is such an awesome statement, because I also believe that the coach who knows why beats the coach who knows how. So this is by an engineer named Emerson. Sometimes it's attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it's not. It's an engineer. And this quote has 3 core parts that I've learned the hard way, and it doesn't change in the COVID era. It's just as much. In fact, you probably have to do more. And one, of course, is without work, one finishes nothing. Ambition, without ambition, you don't start it, but without work, the prize isn't sent to you, you have to win it. Then the second one ties into what Jackie Joyner Kersey and I are talking about. The man who knows how will always have a job, but the man who also knows why will always be his boss. And that resonates. And then the one that is the most important in my sport because of drills is, as to methods, there may be a million, but principles are few. If you grasp principles, you can do great methods. But if you just do methods, you're always going to be in trouble. And we're looking for best principles, even not just necessarily best practices, something that spans all sports. Cam can tell you more because he's like party to this group, but this is the ICCEE group or something, and USA Volleyball's on there somewhere along with pretty much everybody that's working together. And the whole question is, what could we do as if we worked more together with all these groups, the YMCAs and whatever. So as this talk is about, my role at the Olympic Committee level and through everything has been to break down the silos. There are just so many things being learned in ice hockey, and so many, and it's not being shared very well. And if there's anybody that's sharing it well, it's Cam and Christians and Ken Martell from hockey, the group that is doing it well, breaking down the silos. We still have a lot of work to do. And for me, I'm spending more time in my old age attempting to be the teacher that I needed when I was young. And that's sort of a mantra as well. And so I'm sharing that one. Because this isn't an athletic competition, it's a learning competition. This is, how do I learn faster? I mean, you know, if I had two identical twins and she's doing this and she's doing that, can you see who's going to learn faster? And they all go, that. Then why are you doing that? Do that. You know, it's just, this is a learning competition that you want to win. Karch is a pretty great coach, and he happened to be a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. He's one of the best thinkers and learners, maybe, and he's empathetic and he's caring, and God, he's just a fantastic guy. And he said this, and I put it in my slide because it's Karch, not me, saying science has shaped what we're doing. Practice needs to look like an actual game. We're trying to make every second possible to get the most transfer going on. So for me, it captures a lot of what I'm working on in every sport. So I did this in rowing, I remember. And yeah, see, here it is. Sailing drill got 14 million choices. When I type in volleyball drill, I get 32 million choices. But our national teams only do about a dozen drills, which we call grills, to make it sound more game-like, to remind them it needs to be using the net and keeping scoring and be as game-like as possible. That said, as the bottom part says, we have 100 scoring variations. So we are doing things that are very game-like, but we constantly are changing the scoring. And a lot of my material has, like, you know, 100 different scoring variations for one drill. And so the kids think it's a new drill because you change the scoring. But we don't do many drills. We just do about 10 core drills, which we call grills. Culture eats talent for lunch. Culture eats strategy for lunch. And highly recommend, if you haven't spent time on Dan Coyle's website, reading the talent code or the culture code, highly recommended to add it to your arsenal. And then we need to spend time contemplating your core values. And by doing that, I anchor to that. When I get buffeted by parents, I go, this is a core value for me. I'm sorry, this is how I do it. Second request that you'll get if you email me is this article that changed my life. As it says here, few articles have impacted me more than reading this 20 years ago. It's now closing in on 40 years ago. But when I printed this in 2000 or about 2000, it was about that time. Long story short, this article called Decisions about Dr. Daniel Kahneman, who, and it says Kahneman, and it should be Kahneman. He's got double N on his name. He won the Nobel Prize for the same kind of research. But in '85, he started talking about regression to the mean and how people make poor decisions. And this 7-page Discover magazine article just blew me out of the water. And it helps you give the science to how we get fooled by randomness, which is Tim Gilovich's book is similar, How We Know What Isn't So. Kahneman has a book called Taleb has a book called Fooled by Randomness, but it's, you know, our brains just can't do some of this stuff and we get fooled. So the quick story on this as to why I found it so valuable is Kahneman was talking he's an Israeli mathematician psychologist. He was talking to the Israeli fighter pilots, instructors, not even the pilots. He was talking to the instructors of the pilots. And in doing so, he explained how praise works and punishment doesn't. And one of the guys raised his hand and said, with all due respect, what you're saying is for the birds. I praise my pilots after a good landing, and invariably they do worse. And I chewed them out because this is a multi-million-dollar aircraft in the tradition of my military upbringing after a bad landing, and invariably they do better. Don't tell me that praise works and punishment doesn't. My experience contradicts you. Kahneman stepped back and said it was the single most exciting moment of my life to realize that these gifted teachers were being fooled by regression to the mean. And in volleyball, the example I use is if I pass 5 out of 10 well on my average, right on the target area for the setter, and I go on a streak of 10 in a row, even though my average is 5 out of 10, should I praise you, punish you, or ignore you? And everybody goes, well, you should praise them. Okay. After doing that, mathematically, statistically, probably what's going to happen in the next 10? And the answer remains the same for my average, 5 out of 10. So what happens is we jinx them. We say we jinxed him. He was playing great until I spoke about it. I shouldn't have said anything and all this other bullshit that we believe in. The reason it's so important in my sport, and I think in all of sport, is for the other side. If in volleyball, if somebody does 0 out of 10, usually the coach stands up and goes, substitution, Cam, get over here and sit on the bench. Criminy, you normally pass half of your things right on the money and you've done 0 out of 10. Where the hell's your head, Cam? Don't you know your grandmother's in the stands dying of cancer and you're passing like this? Oh my God, I can't believe you. And sit there and think about how shitty you're playing right now. And then some coaches will say, do physical punishment, drop and give me 20, run lines because you played so poorly in that game or whatever. And after all this punishment, Cam, are you ready to get back in and show me what you're made of? Oh, I am, coach. And then they come back in, and what happens in the next 10? Probably 5 out of 10. So don't tell me punishment isn't working, because I see it work every friggin' time. And just know that this decisions article, as you see the paragraph about a general facing dilemma, 600 of them will die unless he leads them. First route, 200 will be saved. Second, 1/3 chance that 600 souls will be saved, and 2/3 chance that none will be saved. A 2/3 chance that none will be saved. How do people choose these things, which mathematically are the same answer? But the way it's phrased in one, humans choose 2/3 to 1/3 this one, and the way it's phrased in the other, they choose this one, even though they're the same thing. So enough said. I spend 5 minutes on it because it really impacted my life. Not sure how you pull it off in rowing, but the question is, for me, where's your whiteboard? I become a teacher. I know in hockey that you can write on the glass. I know in beach volleyball, we can draw on the sand. But when you go to anywhere in the world and you go to a classroom, they have a whiteboard. And as you can see here, Hugh McCutcheon, our gold and silver medal Olympic coach, the practice objectives are not a secret to the players. They're up on the whiteboard before practice starts. And they can ask questions and they can improve it before practice even starts, because they're pretty bright people. So I used to keep my stuff in the magical hidden book of John, and I'd open up the magical book and say, we do this now, and then I'd close the magical book, and everybody's going, what's next, and I don't do that anymore. I let them all know what's coming. If you haven't researched John Holt, worth a little Google, going down the rabbit hole for a few, an hour or two, seeing how he teaches music, which is a motor skill, not just like rowing, they're motor skills. And he wrote this, and I've always used it since I read it. People think that I learned to play and then it's time to play the cello. No, it's not 1-2 process. This is all one. And he does a lot of impact of play in the musical world of motor skill. So this is almost I'm doing a brain dump of everything I know. So when I get an intern, and I've had dozens of interns, I give them this for their computer and I say, I have these 6 friends who serve me true. Their names are what, where, why, how, when, and who. Put this on, and before you turn something into me, make sure that you've answered these 6 friends. So that when I get it, I'm going to know who, and I'm going to know when, and I'm going to have the what. And if that's the case, you're never going to get into trouble with me. We're going to discuss it. But if you ask yourself these 6 questions after you do something, sometimes you go, shit, I forgot the what, or, oh my God, I didn't put in when. How could I forget the when, you know? And this poem helps me never forget. Most coaches practice for performance, or for practice and not for performance. Just very, very, very true. My son is number 5 over here on the left side. This is the year before he played for Berlin. And one of the reasons he's a good volleyball player is he can touch over 12 feet. So it's kind of cool to see him out there making a living at something he loves now for 6 or 7 years. Pretty cool as a dad. D. Hawk. This is a motor learning for us principle. We think a principle of learning that if you do these clear and simple things, the athletes come up with all these complex and intelligent behaviors. But when you create all these complexities, you get stupid behaviors. And I think that's why we always go for simple over complex. Youth sports mathematics. 4 kids in a ball, what happens? And the answer is they play. 4 kids a ball an adult, what happens? And the answer is they drill. And we have to break this mathematical problem apart. So in my sport, and I think, you can translate a version of it, but in my sport, kids say 2 things. Coach, when do we get to blank? And I ask it universally, doesn't matter what country in the world, and I've been to about 70 so far, and hasn't changed in any of the 70. Coach, when do we get to blank? Answer 1 is play. And that means their practice is probably too much drilling. And second, coach, when do we get to spike? In my sport, that means that I teach spiking first, but the tradition is to teach it 4th, after you've passed and set and served. And I'm just saying that they love to spike, and so we spike right away, and then we get kids and boys and girls hooked on the sport. So that your sport, those of you listening in to this rebroadcast may have a sport that, coach, when do we get to and if it's like hit or something, then you should be hitting more. That's how you hook them. This is my COVID era photo, taken from a distance, and the group we did just before the shutdown really occurred, and we taught him sitting volleyball, and the kid got a balloon with volleyball skills on it, and he took it home. And walking by, seeing him teaching his mom and dad how to play sitting volleyball over a chair just made my day, because you can still do things. You got to do it in a faster learning model. For a lot of team sports, like doubles volleyball teaches you faster than 6-on-6, and triples basketball at the Olympics is going to help people get better at 5-on-5, and a lot of things you can do 1-on-1. For anybody listening, I'm sharing this because this blew me away also. You're going to go to YouTube after this is over, and you're going to type in backwards bicycle, and this multi-million view clip is going to show up that lasts about 7 minutes. And you're going to see a guy whose bike was changed only in one way, and he's a really good bike rider. And it makes the handlebar go right, and his engineering friends, the wheel goes left, and vice versa. And that's the only change. So the question is, how long does it take him to learn to ride this bike? And most people will say minutes or hours. And after you watch the video, you'll be blown away to find out that it took him 8 months to learn to ride the bike with one change. So I love weaving into my coaching, changing coaching coaches sessions, the question about, well, how did you learn to ride a bike? And I'll pick up somebody in the stands and I'll say, okay, I'm going to ask you 4 questions to see how loved you were, because nobody's ever died playing volleyball, but people die learning to ride a bike. So it's way more dangerous than volleyball. So let's find out how loved you were. Did your parents hire a bike riding coach? And they laugh and go, no. Okay. How many bike riding drills did you do during learning to ride a bike? And again, their answer is none, except in like 1%. Well, how many, did you go to bike riding summer camp? No. And then finally, well, what progressions did you do to learn to ride a bike? Did you pedal right-footed for a while, then left-footed, and then put your hands on the handlebars and blah, blah, blah? No. And some people will say, well, I did training wheels. And there's been a German study that shows training wheels slow the learning process down by about a 33% or something, remarkable amount. But what we have come to see in a cool way, because of what's the key thing about learning to ride a bike is balance, is that kids now don't, have pedals or, anything. They just learn to ride a balance bike, and then they shift over to a bike and they can ride. And finally, based on drilling, again, being a drug of coaches, in my humble opinion, when you played tag, how many tag drills did you do before you learned to win or do well in tag? And you just play tag, and then you get tagged and you figure it out. You don't do tag drills either. Linton DeMata put together a nice study of Brazil after hearing me and Doug Beal and some of our sports, and he made a pretty big shift in volleyball for Brazil and for himself. And he realized that in talking to his top players, that all these people, that their first coach was the game. And I rather like that, because we can see all the research about street soccer and ways to play without a coach, developing pros faster than non-pros. But again, the intrinsic learning and the problem solving that comes from playing by yourself in whatever it is pretty valuable, and I think needs to be encouraged. So you've heard me tell a few stories, but I'm going to just say we need to be better storytellers. And this great writer and storyteller about the power of story, Jim Lair, all his tennis stuff is fantastic. And of course, the Navajo have the storyteller mom and stuff, the storyteller dolls and things. We just need to be better storytellers, because humans remember stories far more effectively than facts and opinions, even better than facts. If you weave facts into a story, they'll remember it better than if you ask them to remember the fact. That's just how it works in the human. Lately in the COVID era, I've got a chance to see a person that I've only read before, and that's Atul Gawande. He's a surgeon, and his book, Notes on Surgeon's Notes on Performance, some of the stuff that comes out of it is just brilliant for sport, even though he's talking surgery and medical ways. And his line that says, we haven't used the ability science has already given us and made adequate efforts to change that. A science of performance in surgery is another motor skill area. All right, we talked about regression of the mean, but I also share here this, we gotta understand the impact of variance in everything, whether it's rowing or whatever. Variance is part of being a human. We are not metal machines that can crank the same thing. And when we think we are, let's take a hammering a nail. You hammer a nail 100 times and you hit it 100 times, you think you've done a great job. But if you study where you hit the head of the hammer, you'll see that it's a bell curve. And yes, you hit the center the most, but you hit a bunch on the edges and more towards the middle and the most in the middle. But it's a shape of a bell curve because we're humans. And everybody has this variance built into how they pitch and how they row and how they throw and everything. So what I learned the hard way in my sport is that I would say pass to the net. And because of this bell curve, half the balls were going over the net. And I didn't realize that I was putting them in the middle of the variance and resulting in balls flying over the net. Then I would say serve the ball over the net. And that meant that half of the balls that aired low were going into the net. And I would say hit the line, and again, half the balls were going wide out. So we now have this sort of good mistake versus a bad mistake, and we say things like, we put our setters as a target 3-4 feet off the net at the highest level and way off the net when they're younger because their bell curve is really wide. This is an actual, I didn't put the bell curve into it, but you can see the variance at the Olympic level of where the great Iranian setter received contact of the ball. That bright red stripe is where the dream target is, but all these others show the bell curve of where people pass to as humans. Everybody listening, I hope you understand. I hope you're all already teaching others to learn what you're doing better. And this is an example in my case. My son starts to teach during the COVID era. And I think what Cam's doing here is great. And through COVID and beyond, we can do better by teaching, I learn, and getting even our athletes to teach more and things like that. Yeah, if 2020 was a drink, what would it be? That's my drink right there. Colonoscopy prep. That's how 2020 is for me. There's my colonoscopy or my COVID era slide for sure. But you want to decide whether you're going to be more of a guide on the side or a sage on the stage. And the frustrating part about wanting to give so much information in this event is that I have to be more of a sage on the stage and don't have time to be in your gym or on your water with you, being a guide on the side. That's because learning is more effectively remembered if you learn it intrinsically. How long has it been since you've ridden a bike? I don't know, could be 2 years. What do? You get on a bike, you ride off with a wobble, maybe for one pedal. That's intrinsically learned, and that's the best remembered, which is, you haven't taught them if they haven't learned, as Wooden once said. Too many coaches say, I taught it to them. No, not if they haven't learned it. And learning is more effective when it's intrinsically learned. The least effective learning is when I tell you the answers, which is young John Kessel, telling him what to do. So I've become much more of a guided discovery person. And it takes longer by asking questions than saying, do this because I'm the coach. But none of my kids in volleyball make an error and then look at the bench and make a mistake and look at me for the answer, because I taught them to teach themselves and they don't look at me for the answers. So we need to guide more discovery and be the extrinsic answer far, far less, if not just practically eliminated. Now we're getting into something we don't have time to do, unless you want to bring me back sometime, Cam, and we'll talk motor learning or something. But because this is an all-encompassing shit I've learned the hard way, these are words I've changed. I've gotten rid of the word try because it gives them an excuse to not do it. Yeah, Cam, I'll try and do this clinic for you. is totally different than I'll do this clinic for you. I want to get rid of the word hate. My kids say, God, I hate this drill. No. Hate is a really big word. It's saved for Adolf Hitler. It's saved for really, really bad shit. It's not, I hate my hair, okay? You need to come up with a better word. Don't, based on the time we've got and my slide number here, maybe I'll tell at the very end. I want to keep true to the time for all of you that have been here so long. Don't is a word I eliminate. I say everything in what I want and not what I don't want, because your brain can't really remember a negative. Store a negative it's just, it's a positronic thing. The word but, I used to say a ton. That's a pretty cool library shelf you got back there, but. And as soon as I say the word but, the complement slams. And so you just have to change the word but to and. And when I did, the complement was heard. And I can't remember the last time I said but. I really work hard to get rid of it. Obviously, we want to get rid of the word can't. And I really struggle with coaches who say always and never, because those are those absolutes that aren't factual. And you need to get to words that are more reality-based for your kids. Same as worst and best. Now, a word I love to use is yet. I still say it to my son. He said, God, I just struggle. I said, yet, you're still learning. You're still learning. So this that's it, way to go, good job was young John Kessel. I would go, that's it, way to go. And 76% of Wooden's coaching, the great teacher that he was specific. And I realized that I'm not specific enough, and I work to be more specific. So it's not that I'm not encouraging. It's not, Andrew, that I don't want you to say, that's it. It's what I want you to put in as a comma afterwards, and then fill in the it. When you say to me, that's it, and that's it, I might be thinking it's my shoelaces, for God's sakes, or, I have no idea what the it is you're referring to. A good teacher is specific about the it, or the what it is, that the way to go, or what the good job was. So I simply now say, good job, comma, and then I fill in the blank, and I be more specific. I've also found that it's really more powerful to say, instead of, do you have any questions, to say, what questions do you have? Again, it's the same set of words essentially, but it makes them answer rather than say none. They're just subtly but important. So a big part of the USOC website, if you haven't bounced around, those of you that are listening, you should type in US Olympic Committee American Development Model and bounce around in the stuff that they put together, including this document of quality coaching framework and the ADM materials. And there, it's all free, and you can use it for your sport. And some great stuff there. Part of ADM is what in Canada you'll still find to hear the term long-term athletic development, LTAD. So the big three things I've learned the hard way about LTAD are listed here. That biology doesn't know birthdays. And because of that, you need to keep as many kids as long as possible. And I'm going to add another important statement to that sentence. Keep as many kids as long as possible in as healthy of an environment as possible. And then finally, decide slowly. So I can give you a story example that probably would transfer to many other sports, to those of you listening. In our sport, in the city of Colorado Springs, where I've lived for 50 years. Nearly 100 kids try out for the 7th and 8th grade girls volleyball team. And they keep 12 8th grade and 12 7th grade. And they cut at the age of 13 and 14, 75 kids. That's violating the keep as many kids as long as possible rule in my book. And so I went to the ADs, and in a very condensed version, we created a team of kids that were the 25th through the 36th that could come practice alongside the actual team, the two teams, on the third court on Monday. And they'd have to follow what the 7th grade coach was doing. On Tuesday, the 37th through the 48th came. On Wednesday, the 49th through the 60th came. On Thursday, 61 to 70 came. And then we couldn't keep any more. That Thursday, we had to stop. Every third Saturday, with only one practice a week, all the Mondays we'd go to a Monday gym and play all the other Mondays from all the other schools that were cutting kids so much. All the Tuesdays went to the Tuesdays. And they rotated schools so they could play different things. They got a t-shirt for $5 that said Jenkins Middle School, just like the other, not a uniform, not necessarily even a number, but Jenkins Middle School volleyball. And why this story is so important is because at the high school level, 50% of the kids who were kept on the varsity and JV and C team came from the kids who were cut. We only got to practice once a week, not the whole time, but they got to grow for 2 more years. And maybe some of them went and played doubles to get better. Maybe some of them went on to a club team. I don't know. They love the volleyball. I don't know. But the kids that we would have cut made the JV and C team and the varsity teams. So that matters a lot to me as a little scientific fact. I coach for the 97%, like I said, and you kind of have to think about, why do I do this? Because I'm going to pass the textbook, or I'm going to develop their grit, or, more questions. I hear a lot of coaches say, I believe, and I go, yeah, but that doesn't make you a better coach. It's what you're doing. It's your behavior. And Haim Genot, Haimgnott, had an awesome poem called The Impact of Teachers. And in 1995, Tom Crawford was in charge of the U.S. Olympic Committee coaching education. And he changed the word teachers to coaches, and shared it with all the Olympic coaches in a conference we were having. And it's pretty damn true and powerful. And we have a film of this where you see all their top coaches sort of saying it, but I think it translates to any sport. And so that's why I'm sharing it as one of the things I've learned that hasn't changed even in the COVID era. It's become more important. There's a pretty remarkable set of facts. This is the motor learning talk I did for the Cleveland Indians. We don't have time to do it, but I want you to know some facts about my sport. In '83, the USA men, starting actually in the '70s, because of Dr. Carl McGowan and Richard Schmidt, followed motor learning science principles in the training we've done. We've won 8 gold medals in the past 3 decades. The women's team, I can tell you some pretty amazing numbers. The women, the #1 team sport at the high school level for the last half a decade is volleyball. Girls volleyball, ahead of basketball, ahead of soccer, ahead of softball. People don't know it, but that's just the high school federation fact. It's the #1 sport, participation-wise. They go off to nearly 15,000 scholarships at the D1, 2, and NAI and JC level and stuff. How many gold medals in the Olympics have the women won? And the men have won 8. And the answer is none. How many gold medals have they won internationally? The men have won 8 of these gold medals, 3 of them Olympic and 5 internationally, the World Championships, for example. How many for the women? And the answer is 1 in 2014, the first one in 60 years. So how many scholarships are there for men? If the women have 15,000 and just won 1 gold medal, with it being the #1 sport, which football is for the men, way ahead of volleyball, how many scholarships are there for men in the United States? And the answer is under 200. 15,000 for the women in college and 200 for men. 1 gold medal in 60 years, 8 gold medals in 30 years. That's why motor learning science is so important to me, in my humble opinion. There's a picture of the place I'm talking to you from, our wounded vet, Bison Peak Lodge out of Colorado, where I've retired to and not retired because I've worked harder than I've ever had physically. But we have 25 teepees, we have Conestoga wagons, a lodge, cabins, fly fishing, 3D archery, and we bring up vets and first responders to heal, as well as we do weddings so that we can pay for the first responders free. This is the teepee and a couple of the Conestogas you can see in the picture, and there's a teepee off to the far right. They're double queen beds inside of them. Just Google Bison Peak Lodge, Colorado. We got mentioned about a month ago in USA Today as one of the top 10 glamping spots in the United States. Kind of cool. But this is where I'll be doing clinics from, including this one for camp. But live clinics after COVID. Right now, we're Zooming everywhere. And that's life in the COVID era, and that's okay. I'm sharing also that I don't do goal setting anymore. What I do is I say, what is the list that you're gonna do to get better? Because most people I find set goals like, I wanna make the Olympic team, or I wanna win the conference. I mean, if you had a college conference and you asked every D1 coach in that conference, what are your goals? Out of 10 or 12 in that conference, 10 would say, we'd like to win the conference. You know, what a waste of goal setting time there. Of course you want to win the conference. I want to know what you're going to do. What's your commitment to do this all? And that's what I want to hear about. As we close out, for Rachel and rowing and Andrew and your sport, this is volleyball coaches and trainers. And since I was let go by USA Volleyball in June, the banner has been this thing with Encore and Paro and Training Reality and some of the things we talked about. So they made this, so that's Mike Hewlett in the upper left, 4-time Paralympic coach. He passed away a couple of years ago, quad amputee, giving back to the sport. There's Long Ping again, and we got a picture of my dad playing doubles when he was a kid. So what is VCT? Volleyball Coaches and Trainers is what it means. And I was in Germany doing a camp for Brian because kids couldn't come over to the US and pay the airfare because they're Army brats and they couldn't pay the $600 room and board. So we brought the camp to them in Vilsec. And we did it for $75 a kid. Awesome. 200 kids. It was, and it's still going, and it's an awesome experience. And they all come in from Europe, from all the bases, and they get this great camp. But after it was over, Brian says, how do we keep this going the first year? How do we keep in touch? And I said, yeah, maybe you could form a Facebook group. I don't know. So he went off and he formed Volleyball Coaches and Trainers. It is now a closed group, as you see, private. It wasn't for a while, but it is now. And it has nearly 22,000 members. And we only expected a couple hundred. But what we did is the very opening thing in the things you've got to follow is that you have to say what you mean and mean what you say, and you can't be mean when you say it. And in this group, when people start to get mean, we warn them once and then we boot them. We don't want trolls. We don't want assholes just being assholes. We want good discussion. And we just want people to feel safe in this place. So I think you can create your own for your own sport. But that's the motto that you got to have in it so that you can have good discussion. Can't do it without humor. So on Go Comics and cartoonstock.com, I get a lot of funny things, the legs are first to go if you were shooting a basketball thing. On this also, you see Steve Bohr, that's a cartoon, but on this also is some videos to watch after we talk, especially if you're in a relationship. The first one is called It's Not About the Nail. You just go to YouTube, type in It's Not About the Nail, you watch it, you're gonna go, shit, I need to use that with my wife tomorrow type stuff or whatever. Canada USA Hockey has done It's Just a Game and Just Relax, I think is the other one, but it starts with It's Just a Game. Priceless for parents to get some humor. The second one that is not on this list is this, help me here, Cam, it's out of Nova Scotia, and it's about sport parents, but I can't remember the title to find it on YouTube. But it's, again, Nova Scotia Sports. If you type that in sports parenting, it'll probably pop up for those of you listening. And in it, they go around the circle, and it's like an Alcoholic Anonymous for parents, and it's priceless as well. I've got a huge hard drive of funniest videos showing sports fails, and one of the best ones, again, I can send it to you if you want it because you're going to teach motor learning, but we know in motor learning that words have little meaning to beginners, and there's so many examples of that in America's Funniest Home Videos, I can't even begin. I love Monty Python and the Black Knight. I've got an article called No More Mistakes and You're Through by John Cleese out of Forbes Business Magazine. And just the title says it, what it's about. If you stop making mistakes, you're going to be fired. And that's the flip of what the traditional coach often says. And I just need humor. This link that you should see / hopefully you can copy it down, gets you to this great article about these 25 heuristics promote more effective learning. They're all written too tiny to read because I want you to download the article and go through them, and boom, you're going to go down about 24 rabbit holes probably that you hadn't gone down before. For me, the podcasts and links over the decades that have mattered, Coach Your Brains Out, Way of the Champions, Train Ugly, Talent Code, Perception Action Coupling, Finding Mastery, Changing the Game Project, and the Talent Equation. These are the ones that I've learned the most of. Those of you that are listening obviously already know about CAM and the Sports Center Leadership podcast, so you should already be able to grab those webinars without seeing it here in this link because you're listening to this one right now. The books that matter for me are listed here. I've got a couple of them on PDF if you need them. The Drunkard's Walk and Optimal Learning Theory you can get by Wolf. We didn't talk again about motor learning, but her optimal learning theory research is impacting my sport a lot in the last 5 or 6 years and doing great work there at UNLV. Make It Stick is a classic. I've already mentioned it down. Win the Day, Jerry Lynch's book, is awesome. And Coach Your Brains Out, I helped Billy Allen and John Mayer do. It's another really good book. So those are the books I highly recommend. In closing, this is how to find me on Twitter, my email. Like I said, if you want to get a couple of the copies of the things that I'll send you a motor learning article too. And, that's where I still work at World Paravolley, and that's our Bison Peak Lodge place. And I am doing a lot of stuff for the International Federation, despite my being here at 9,000 feet in the mountains in the boonies. Our closest neighbor is 4 miles away, and on 3 of our 4 sides, our closest neighbor is 20 miles away. So I'm in the boonies, at 9,000 feet. But it's a pretty magical place. So, any questions, since I did the sage on the stage for an hour plus here? Yeah.
So much good stuff. That I think for those that have the pleasure of listening to this, they'll re-listen to it. I know I'm going back to listen to. There's just so much good stuff here. So I don't know if there's any other questions, Andrew, Rachel, if you guys have got anything, because John, you have covered so much territory. I think the one for me is, there's the consistency piece, which you spoke to with Wooden. And then you follow that with innovation. And I love that contrast of how can you be consistent and also innovate and be creative and find different ways to do it.
Well, I think that if you talk to Karch as an example, thanks for this question. It's made me jump right to Karch. Karch is always looking at new ways to learn faster, which means if that violates the consistency policy, I don't think it does, because he consistently is looking for new ways to learn. And that said, what is so cool is that he and his coaching staff emulate that mistakes are okay. Since the gym, it's okay to make a mistake because you're not doing it on purpose, and it's part of learning, especially as you innovate and do new things and attempt new things you've never done before, you're going to screw up. That's what Cleese's article so powerfully explains so well in business. Karch emulates that. And so when he screws up in the gym, he doesn't, hide behind his fame or whatever. He goes, "Oh, that sucked. How can we do this better?" And that's pretty cool to see out of an Olympic coach, for sure.
I love that because of there's a humility to that. There's an honesty, there's an authenticity, I think. And that idea of the Japanese Kaizen and constant never ending improvement of always looking for better ways. And you speak to that idea of efficiency and effectiveness and how important that is over, well, this is the way we've always done it, particularly in the sort of whatever 2021's got in store, because I think many of us want to see 2020 and just say goodbye. But moving forward, what's you're doing amazing things at the ranch, and I'd love you to just talk a little bit about that. In terms of what do you see moving forward? What are some of the great things that we can keep doing? Because I don't think we would have connected like this without the technology. So what do you see sort of the top couple of things, or the top thing at your list that you think, hey, I'm really looking forward to this re-entry into whatever comes out of this COVID experience?
Well, I'm going to put the onus back on you for a second here. You said white belt mentality. Some of your listeners to this podcast may have missed that phrase. And so can you share with the listeners how that impacted you and what that means to you and how they can learn more about it?
Yeah, look, well, the common theme through all of this is the people that I come in contact with that I want to share here is about problem solvers and looking for different ways to do what we do better. And I think that's the common trait that you speak to, and that runs across everybody that I try and bring on to share the
what? Hang on. You try to bring on?
I can't get everybody on that I want to get on, But
you work to get them on.
So, but taking theory to practice, I think that's the element that, whether it's best practices, moving from best practices to applying principles. And I don't believe that's not jargon. It's you on the ground and you're constantly doing it. And that, I think, you apply that to, the construction of a teepee that now has power. I love when you share that. Now we have teepees that have double beds and power, so you can plug in your phone so that you can use it as a camera. Those the innovations that I think you speak to here go way beyond sport. It's way beyond. This is about being a better human being. And I think that, for me, that's what keeps me doing this. It's not about the exercise, and I know that's been bled to death in every way, shape, and form. But it's about how we care for the people that we're working with, and how that transfers into life.
Yeah, I mean, Mary Lou Angelo, said that whole transfers to sport, and kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And athletes don't care how much you know, really, until they know how much you care. And that's what I think you're seeing the Pete Carrolls and the Steve Kerrs of the world, and the Phil Jacksons that, and the John Woodens, that, he cared a boatload about him even after they left his program and to the very end. And so, that's another line that I could have probably put in as a slide, because it's true. I think the white belt mentality, everybody should just Google that and see how the 12th degree black belt judo master, as he's passing away, says, bury me in my white belt for this next journey, because I want to constantly learn. And I think anybody that in the COVID era chases out the chances to learn, I've said a couple times, the rabbit hole. I love going down the rabbit hole. I love going off on something and then just chasing and seeing where that came from and what the roots are to that concept of that idea, because there are some great thinkers. And that's kind of why you see the surgery, performance of a surgeon is a pretty important read, I think. And why you'll often see you jump out of your world and go into a different sport or even to the business world. I mean, we did the number one sport for U.S. Olympic Committee sponsors when I was there, for the 30 years I was there, was sitting volleyball. Everybody can play it. It's safe. You get down on the floor. You're not going to blow your knees. You can even be disabled, and you can play with your USOC sponsor mates or whoever comes in. And to the end, they loved it. Well, part of the reason they loved it was because they're doing something they've never done before, so everybody's bad. And at the same time, they're having a blast. In fact, some of the vets that come and play it, the PT will go, that's the first time I've seen this guy laugh since he came back from the theater with his legs blown off, because he's playing volleyball. We're not drilling it. We hardly do any drills. We just go out and start playing sitting volleyball. It doesn't matter. Here we talk to the people about Rock and Ridge. And if you go up the ridge, I've bought 5 or 6 different swings, because everybody knows how to swing, right? You grab the thing and we all know how to swing. But when you get these different swings, like Aladdin Magic Carpet Ride, or a skateboard swing where you go sideways on the darn thing, or a spinner swing, you're still swinging and going back to your childhood of swinging, but you're having a new experience because you got to figure out how to make this thing swing. And that then is followed by Pinecone Putt-Putt Golf, a 9-hole course. Who the hell's good at putting with an aspen branch a pine cone? Nobody. So everybody starts the playing field level. And, if you pick the wrong pine cone, it rolls right or rolls left, and you got to figure out the roll of your pine cone and stuff. But you're putt-putt golfing with your family or your friends, and and we're not doing a single putt-putt pine cone drill. We're just, here's the tee, putt it into the hole, And then finally, Cody came back, and this will blend, I think, your best example, Cam. So my son goes on a Monday or on Sunday night. He wins the MVP award in this match in front of tens, like 6,000 people at the Berlin home match. Picks up a beautiful $1,000 watch, and calls me all excited. He played great and blah blah blah. Tuesday, they pull the entire Bundesliga together, same name as you hear in soccer, but this is the volleyball program. They're 22-0, and they say, we're going to play this Sunday's match with no fans. Okay. The next day, they call them back together and say, you know what? We're canceling the entire league season. Thursday, Trump announced the EU travel ban. Friday, Cody turns in his team car, his car that they give him as an athlete, to drive while he's there for free. Saturday, he turns in the keys to his apartment, and Sunday, he's flying home. Boom. That's a pretty big shift. But what did he do when he got here? We went up to the used AstroTurf field that we have as a donation from a school that ripped theirs up, and we put it down here, so it's got lines all over the place. But we went up to that AstroTurf field. We staked out a volleyball court. We pointed it so when he practices jump serving, the balls roll back down the hill towards him. And then he went up on the hillside in the middle of the golf course, and he built a gym. Elk antler pull down, barbells and dumbbells out of wood and rocks for different weights, an ab roller out of another piece of wood, a pull-up bar with big, huge chains out of another piece, deadlifts out of big fence posts or trees that we have, a slack line, a climbing rope, and, it goes viral in Berlin. Berlin recycler builds gym in wild forest. That's his solution. I've got to keep working on what I can control. And I think, I listened to Vidman last night on 60 Minutes or night before last, I think. And, with all the shit that's hit him and stuff, he's sitting there going, I'm focusing on what I can control, and I can't control what these people say about me and all this other stuff. That applies to everything that's happening here. What we do, just so you know about how this works, because the teepees are so spaced out and you can just put one person in a teepee, we can still kind of socially distance up here. And of course, you're in the wilderness, so you can stay far away from each other. And we build a Sperry tent on top of the AstroTurf, so it's open air. So you're, the wind is blowing the whole time you're in a tent. You're not in a tent because it has no walls. But they get handed by Challenge America, a thing that Amy Grant and Vince Gill support. They get handed a guitar to keep for free, a Rode guitar, the PTSD vets. And they get put in a teepee, and they get paired up with a music therapist and a lyricist. And they spend 3 to 4 days together writing the stuff out of their head. And then they perform a concert in front of their friends and family on the property and sing the stuff that's been troubling them in their head out into a song. And the songs have been rock songs and folk songs and, piano songs and all these different things. My favorite one was when we were in Nashville at Amy Grant's place. The guy killed 50 plus people in Iraq, and his grandmother wouldn't sleep with him, sleep in the same house with him. And he wrote a lullaby to his grandmother, who was very special to him, about how she was safe and able to stay in the house. And now she stays in the house with him again, because he sings the lullaby every night, So it's just a place of healing, and we don't want to be a place of infection. So we still wear masks and we still keep distance. But it's pretty easy to be distant up here at 9,000 feet. And the rays, they blast the teepees and the sun pretty fast here at 9,000 feet to the UV rays. So
amazing.
We feel fairly
Yep.
safe.
All right, Andrew, question?
John, I just want to thank you so much. I don't really have like a question, but just a statement on, how you've impacted me as a coach. I'm a student in the sport coaching leadership program with CAM, and it was the first class that I had taken. So I'm a head varsity lacrosse coach for boys lacrosse in New York State.
Oh, sweet.
I'm a middle school technology teacher. So he sent me the YouTube video of you speaking at the USA Hockey Conference on principles of motor learning. And when you talked about train ugly and I think it was the Brazilian volleyball team and summary feedback, I was at the same time learning about the game's approach to coaching, and myself and my my assistant completely transformed how we design our practice plans, and talking about not having blocked off drill sessions. So just just an example of what we did this past Sunday, because we're allowed to have youth sports in New York State. We had a youth lacrosse clinic. We had 4 mini 3-on-3 games with 2nd through 9th grade. And we had first-time newcomers. If you've been playing forever, if you've been playing, this is your first time. And we said to each other, we made a pact. We are not going to stop or correct anything in the games, and we're going to let them play. Mm-hmm. But what we will do is we will give positive feedback. And it was chaotic, and it looked like just a mess at first because we were trying to organize this all. But I remember what you were talking about train ugly. From an outsider's point of view, it looks chaotic, but really there's tactical and technical skill development that's happening before your eyes. You just got to look a little deeper. So
yeah, that is awesome, Andrew. I know that, when my son left soccer and all his buddies but one changed over to lacrosse, since I had played at Colorado College in the 70s, they said, would you coach? And I said, yeah. I led it. Somebody else coached the first year. And then I said, boy, I can do better than this. Because I remember the 2 things that came out of lacrosse. One is there's a game called Chumash, and anybody that knows lacrosse probably knows it. But you've got to build Chumash goals, and you've got to let the kids play as much Chumash as they can. And you can even have, end of every practice, a 10-minute Chumash session that adds up to something you're keeping track over the course of the season, so that as you change partners, it's kind of like I would create a king of Chumash.
Yeah.
Where you're changing partners all the time, and you're seeing who can win no matter who he's playing with as a partner, and can still win a 2-on-2 Chumash game. How can they do that? Because he's not starting yet, he's winning every game. What is that about? Yeah. And the second thing out of Chumash, which is like doubles volleyball for lacrosse essentially, is we would do man ball. And the coach that I had in the beginning, he controlled every man ball throw. And so 20 kids lined up, and 1 ball got thrown, and they did 2-on-1, man ball. And I remember just going, nobody's learned. There's only 1 ball. That's like a scrimmage. You might as well just be scrimmaging. That's actually a line in volleyball I use. If you only have 1 ball in the air above your court, you should just play 6-on-6. You should be scrimmaging. If you only have 1 ball in the air, you're flying around on the lacrosse field, you should be playing lacrosse, 11-on-11. Just play lacrosse. Our job is to come up with what you just did with all these 2 and 3 and whatever person-sized teams, and letting the more skilled be 2 and the lesser skilled be a team of 3. We call that 3-2 wash as well. The lesser skilled, if they do one thing like this, they get a goal or they get a shoot on goal. And you're skilled and you've got to do this 3 times in a row successfully before you get to do it. And these, all I'm doing is changing the scoring variation. I'm not changing the game. I'm weighting it so the lesser skilled have success easier, and the higher skilled have to work harder to get to their success point or whatever, and get the point on the board or whatever. So I remember saying, okay, here's what everybody watch. This is man ball. See this? Okay, Billy, you get in here and you throw the ball anywhere you want. Throw about half this way and half this way, okay? Everybody see how Billy's doing that? All right, get in groups of 4 and go do that. And I didn't throw a single ball for man ball, but I got 5 times the more learning with my group of 20 kids because they weren't standing in line. And that's so frustrating in every sport to see the Major League Baseball. Yes, there were 3 catchers learning, but there were 18 watching, not learning anything. We got to get them out there learning. So that we can do that. You just can never do that enough, in my humble opinion. I mean, you know, Karch and Misty are between the two of them, that's 6 gold medals. What do we know about their history? They played doubles with their mom and dad until from 7 or 8 until they were about 12. And they played doubles all their lives. Karch would sneak in high school at 11 o'clock at night into the East Gym at his school and play doubles until they got kicked out by security. Not 6-on-6, not even 4-on-4. He just played doubles, you know? And it all transfers to the game.
Well, Gary and Paulgate, I think would often say that when they were learning the game, they learned a lot in their backyard. And, you know, Gary and Paulgate, two of the best lacrosse players ever, played at Syracuse. So, you know, they talked about their small-sided pickup games that they would play, you know, and so, but yeah, there's just, we, as a coaching staff, we reflect a lot on, you know, what you've talked about and just about, you know, how we can incorporate learning and develop tactical and technical skills simultaneously rather than blocking them off. So,
yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Rachel,
well, thank you.
Thanks for the email. Anything you got? Any questions?
Had to find the unmute button.
About not drowning.
So, you know, it's interesting to listen to a lot of what you said there. You know, that, like I say, there in the email, there are some key points in there for me. Yeah, when I first started coaching, it was all about the drills, right? Now, I coach women who average between like 35 and 87 or 88 now, right? In rowing, which is a very technical sport. And if you could have a blessing with COVID, it's that we can't row in big boats, right? We have to get down to smaller boats, which in a way means the athletes have to focus more, right, on technique themselves. And
absolutely.
Right, because a single will flip, an 8 will not. Well, you can flip an 8, I've seen it, but chances are you're not, right? So what the coaching has turned more into is confidence, right? Is working on confidence by building in an element of play, right, into the practice. So, you know, like just sit here and do this, right, and see and get faster and faster and faster, and see who can do it the fastest without flipping their boat, and who can sit here and let go of their, you know, who can do this, right, by letting go of their oars and do whatever, and you know, who can do it without flipping. And so we've built that element into a lot of what we're doing, which is then also teaching the skill of balance, right, and confidence and balance. But at the same time trying to make it fun. Now, when we get back into the bigger boats, it's you know, one of the things that I did midway through, I think, last season, when I kept getting complaints from the team that they didn't really know what we were going to do. So your whiteboard example was really good, because I would come in every single morning and write the practice plan on the whiteboard, you know, where we're going to meet, what we're going to do, where I expect them to meet me, around what time if we get separated, you know, all of those kinds of things. And what the drill, you know, was it a UT workout or an AT workout or whatever it was, and what I wanted the outcome of the practice to be, right? And because we were mid-season, a lot less drills and just more and more and more, you know, kind of rowing. But they didn't want to know that day of. So, I mean, it was pretty harsh reality. They were like, we can't eat properly for these work, you know, there's so many things we can't do properly to prepare ourselves for the workout if we don't know what it is in advance. So that started a whole process of telling them in advance, right, the night before, providing them the practice plan. Part of that was because we have to use rowers as coxswains, because we don't have, you know, professional coxswains. So the person that was going to end up getting tagged to be the coxswain was like, I need more time to study. So we did all of that, and we actually improved, right, the confidence in the practice. We improved performance because people knew what to expect when they showed up, even though I still wrote it all out on, you know, on the board. So, you know, paying attention to your athletes and taking cues from them, because when you teach adults or you coach adults, it's a lot less dictating and a lot more listening and observation and hearing what they have to say and adapting, because 25 people on a team, it's basically 3 buckets of people, right? These people who know everything, these people who are very coachable, and these people who are sitting there the whole time thinking about what you just said, right? And how am I really gonna do this? And you have to adapt to all of them, right? And adapting your style and that kind of thing. So, but hearing some of the things that you talked about, purposeful practice as opposed to just practice to practice, that is something I've been trying to do now for quite some time.
You've been trying?
Trying, because we don't have any races right now. We literally don't
Yes,
have
you do.
competitions right now.
You're doing it.
So
I'm doing it. I guarantee you, you're doing it.
right. Well, but one of the things I'm doing with this winter camp that I'm designing is I did a survey, and about half the team came back and said, "What's our goal at the end?" Right? And I came back and said, "Well, what do you want your goal to be at the end?" Right? It's all about you telling me what you want, right? Mm-hmm. And what it came back to is, let's hold a competition and let's create some goofy prize, right? So, we do that. And by the way, I am a coach that one time last year showed up in a shark costume, a left shark costume, and did an entire practice in a shark costume because the team was dragging, emotions were down, trying to train for a race, and I just showed up in a shark costume and went out and said, let's just row, right?
So let me share another thing that I could have thrown in as a slide, and that is pattern interruption. Mm-hmm. When something really matters in your teaching, mm-hmm. The principle of pattern interruption is how you should make sure that that's remembered. Okay. So in your case, you did the shark costume to kind of cheer them up, but on top of that concept of pattern interruption, I use it when something really matters. So I'm going to use my lacrosse example. I hate trash talking. I don't want trash talking on my team. So I want my team to be gentlemen. I want them to be competitive. I want them to be fair. I want them to respect the sports, history and everything. And trash talking isn't part of it, in my humble opinion. So when I gave this talk about how we will never trash talk, and then we decided to set the penalties if we caught ourselves trash talking, I didn't set them, they set them. I came in a tuxedo and I delivered the talk standing in a trash can. That's what's called pattern interruption. Because that was that important to me, I didn't want them to forget this talk about how much coach thinks trash talking is important. So I'm not saying anything other than I love the shark outfit. I'm wondering if in the future that the shark outfit could come out at a time so that they remember the message that you're delivering because you're in this shark costume, in some way, shape, or form. And because they'll remember whatever the hell the shark says, especially the first sentence or two out of your mouth, or out of your teeth or whatever. I mean, I've climbed on the referee stand, which coaches don't normally do, and I've talked through my legs. I've gone up at the University of Oregon. They had a field house and it had a ZZ section. And I went all the way up and delivered my little talk on something for them, specific to them, from the ZZ section of we had to walk all the way up, and we sat there and, where are we right now? We're in the ZZ section. Well, how often have you ever been in the ZZ section? Well, never in my life, So pattern interruption, the world's best stand and deliver, Dead Poet Society with, Robin Williams, the way he would deliver it on his desk, and then all the guys delivered Captain, my captain on the desk. He doesn't do it. You don't do it all the time, but you break the traditional pattern because this is important to you. And the other thing that came to mind while you were talking, Rach, was just that whole, any sport, how much of rowing is mental? How much of volleyball is mental? And you always hear, well, 80%. And then you go, well, how much are you working on the mental game in volleyball? And the answer is always 10%. Well, COVID allows us to do towards the 80, much better, you know,
Yep.
the time we have to work on our mental game. And that's one of the things my son has, you know, been working really hard on that whole half a year that he was off, was the mental side of things.
No, and that's one of the things I send out little quips to them every once in a while that have you thought about this or just question them, you know, what are you thinking about at the start line, right? Things, because as a coach, once your rowers leave the dock, there's a timeout, right? There's no yelling at them from the sideline per se. I mean, I suppose you could if you're in the right race venue, right? You're riding a bike along and you can whistle and talk and yell and do whatever, but you know, I would say the vast majority of our rowing sites do not lend themselves to that. So basically, once they leave the dock, your flock is left, and you're left to have them come back, right, and let you know how they did. And so it really puts you into the listening mode. And if you're lucky, you'll get to see maybe 200 meters of that race, maybe, right, if you're lucky. And so that is one of the things that I like about coaching rowing, is the ability to provide information for athletes to do with what they want, right? And then to listen intently when they come back, right? And maybe not react right away, right? But to take it all in and then talk about it later, so.
You know, you just made me think of I work a lot with U.S. ski and snowboard, snowboard Vail, where, you know, some pretty good people like Michaela came out of, and, you know, our Lindsey Vaughn, and, you know, wonderful athletes. And I get to coach the coaches there. And of course, I ski, but I'm not a ski coach or anything. And you made me think of a guy named John, who was becoming a ski coach, but he explained why, and I think it applies totally to rowing, why he chose skiing over basketball and soccer and the traditional sports. He said, my parents, you see, in basketball, all I heard was my dad, and in soccer, my mom is, and in ski racing, all I hear is, go, and that's it. I just hear that. I still hear my dad. I still hear him, but all I hear is, go, and that's it. And the rest of the time, I'm by myself, and it's just so much better than those other sports.
Well, and I do have to remember to delineate my roles, because I am a referee too, a rowing referee. And so when I am refereeing, I try very hard to just put the blinders on. Remember, I am not the coach at that moment, right? And because I'll watch. And damn apps, you know, where you can track how your team is doing, because they have GPS in, you know, and I'm supposed to be refereeing, and I'm looking down and I'm like, oh, you know, so it's really hard to put that stuff in your pocket and remember that. You think about before you could actually do that. Go back to when you couldn't do that, and make sure that you're listening to them when they come back, and, you know, and that kind of thing. So.
Oh, true. Well, hey, we've been at it 2 hours here, Cam. Should we call it quits?
I think, John, you have got the record for the longest webinar. I've been very strict about the hour, and we've got there's probably at least another hour we can get out of you. So on that note, I love the final quote: love people, serve people, provide value, train to be clutch. You have done that in every way. So John, I cannot thank you enough. I really do appreciate your time, your expertise, and your sharing. So thank you very much.
Okay.